Okay, I'm going to resist the temptation of making this very in-depth. I'll have to really restrain myself here because there is a lot of talking points. I want to talk about the EU elections. One reason I don't make videos on Brexit very often is because it is so dominant in this country. It really has taken over everything. I mean, it has totally um, fixated our politics from any other issue, pretty much. And so I don't know what I can really add to the debate, but I certainly have opinions on it, and I just want to share a few of my thoughts from what I've seen tonight so far. Um, I voted Remain, and I don't regret that. I don't think that I made a mistake in doing so. I still remain wary, particularly of a no deal Brexit. But, and this is a big but, unlike some Europhiles on the Remain side, I'm not blinded by the EU's many faults. And I'm not blinded by the fact that if the EU doesn't change, just looking at results from Italy right now, if the EU doesn't change its attitude, then there won't just be a Brexit. You know what? I'm going to turn this off so that I'm not distracted by that. Um, if there isn't a change in attitude to what's going on, there won't just be a Brexit. There'll be a Frexit, there'll be a Mattel exit, there'll be a Nexit, Grexit, you name it. Because David McAllister, who's a German MEP, despite his British sounding name, he's a German MEP. Um, I'm not sure if he has British parentage or not. He speaks fluent English, but anyway, his attitude kind of is the problem. And he was saying this. He was saying that we need to stand up against the populists. We need to basically have an ever closer union. Now, this is the very mentality that is leading to nationalist parties across Europe, not just in Britain, across Europe, doing well tonight. And if bureaucrats like David McAllister don't realise that, then the EU is going to self destruct. I've never been a lover of the EU as an institution, never. Um, I do see myself as a European, and I make no apology for that. And I do take a dim view of Britons who kind of think that our history has no connection to the history of the rest of Europe. We are a European country historically. We're an island nation with a very distinctive national identity, but we are a European country. In the same way that Japan is an Asian country, but it's got a distinct identity. I'd make that analogy. But I think there is a profound arrogance from bureaucrats that I don't like. I've never liked it. And if I was to change my stance on Brexit, it would probably be because of that. So let me just say off the cuff, any notion of a United States of Europe is not only doomed to failure because it wouldn't work, it's just wrong because it's undemocratic. It shows contempt for the democratic will of people to believe in sovereignty, to believe in national identity. And the problem is, the more Brussels bureaucrats at Juncker push this, the more resentful people will get because they'll say these are just out of touch globalists. Now, I do believe that there are some people on the Leave side who are very inward looking. Um, and I would disagree with their politics in many areas. And I do think there is legitimate questions about the Leave side, not least blatant lies they told in 2016. I also feel I would like to see more Leave leaders rein in on the extremes in their midst. When you get hardline Leave people calling for rioting on the streets or calling people like me traitors, but it isn't just about name calling. Threats of violence should be unacceptable on either side. And for the record, I totally condemn these so-called milkshake attacks on prominent Leave people, Nigel Farage, um, Carl Benjamin, and others. It's infantile, but it's wrong. It degrades politics. Um, so I try very hard to be consistent I voted Remain, but I will condemn extreme Remainers. As for what's going on tonight, what's very obvious is that both the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats have done very well. The Tories have been absolutely hammered. There's no way around it. This is the worst result they have ever had in any election. General elections, council elections, European elections. This is the very worst, apparently since 1832, which brings us way back to the time of Lord Grey and the Duke of Wellington. That's astonishing. Um, in fact, that is pretty much the entire modern Conservative Party history. If we date that to the Tamworth Manifesto under Sir Robert Peel, this is the worst result in their history. That's really staggering. Um, but whilst the Brexit Party's done very well, particularly for a new party, one thing they cannot say is it shows an overwhelming desire to leave, because that doesn't explain how the Liberal Democrats have also done very well. Anne Widdecombe was asked about this in the BBC coverage by Hugh Edwards. She didn't give a clear answer. She claimed that, oh, well, people vote for the Greens and the Lib Dems for a range of reasons, but we're the only party that has had a clear message. But that's not true, because the Lib Dems have campaigned very specifically, very to the point of stop Brexit. You can't get more clear than that. So the Lib Dems have successfully put themselves forward as the anti-Brexit party. Change UK, I think it's become clear that they were never going to be the equivalent of what the SDP alliance was in the early 80s, because back then the Gang of Four were established politicians. They'd all held ministerial positions, among other reasons. But Change UK, for the start, the name is a disaster. And I'm interested in Change UK, but the name is just silly. I mean, you can't really model yourself as Change UK if you're coming from establishment parties and you're not really proposing change. So I think that was a big mistake. I think they should have done some sort of deal with the Liberal Democrats, or accepted that there is a pro-European party already out there, which is the Liberal Democrats. Um, hasn't been great for Labour tonight, but they've done better than the Tories. Just a trivia thing. If Jeremy Corbyn, if there's a general election and Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, apparently he will be the oldest Prime Minister on first election since Lord Palmerston. So that's just a little interesting piece of trivia. Um, I'm going to round this up fairly soon, but it looks like Salvini has done well in Italy and Le Pen has done very well in France. So this isn't just an issue in Britain about the rise of nationalism. And in Hungary, Orban's party, I understand, has done very well. People like Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel need to wake up and see what's going on here. It's no good just announcing nationalism if they don't recognize that any push for so-called further integration is just going to be a mistake. I've spoken to Leave people, friends and acquaintances, who said they would vote Remain if it was about just the common market. But what they don't like is this ever increasing attrition of sovereignty. I've got friends in Spain and Portugal who believe in the United States of Europe. Well, they're friends at the moment, but we may have a falling out over this, because I think it's just not something that's compatible with democracy. There will never be a United States of Europe, because for a start, where would the capital be? Would it be Berlin? Would it be Paris? How do you accommodate all the different languages within one country? How would you have like a standard language, for instance? Um, Culture, okay, you get big countries like the United States, Russia, and China, which have diverse culture within them, but they were established over time as single states. Over time, perhaps with federal systems in the case of Russia and the United States, but they were single states. The European Union can never be a single national entity, because there's just so much difference between its nation states. Europe may be a small continent, but it's a very diverse continent, and I just don't think that will ever work. So the Europhiles really need to drop that notion. Another thing, and I say this to hardline Remainers, their utter contempt for any notion of patriotism is just silly. There are Remainers who love this country, And this is where hardline Brexiteers are deluded, where they think that if you voted Remain, you're not patriotic. There are Remain voting people and Remain politicians who love this country, but it's those Remainers who actually have contempt for the British flag who seem to think that patriotism is a dirty word. I remember I can't remember which Labour MP it was, but he was talking to that chap who's always on the loudspeaker, the colourful character who's always interrupting broadcasts saying, "Stop Brexit, revoke Article 50." You know, he's become quite a colourful character. And actually, the Leave side have their own colourful character, the black guy who's always wearing the Union Jack bowler hat, and they've squared off a few times. But anyway, someone like him, I remember the Labour MP who was going past. I'm trying to remember who it was now. I can't temporarily slips my mind, but he said, "Oh, good work, mate, but you need a few more Union flags." So what this Labour MP was saying was that he agreed with the protest, but you need to show that it's not about being anti-patriotism. It's not about being anti-UK. And I think there are too many um, Remain people, particularly in London, who think that patriotism, think of love of country, think of believing in the United Kingdom, it somehow equates to being far right. Reducing these arguments in this way is pathetic. And I do not like blood and soil nationalism. I've always been clear about that. I do not like to see this rise in ultranationalism. Ultranationalism led to two world wars. But it's happening because the establishment in Brussels and here in the UK is just not listening to concerns. Now, regarding the situation in the UK, it's it's very difficult to know what to do because if tonight's results show anything, it shows that it's been a victory for both hard leave and hard remain. Hard leave exemplified by the Brexit Party, hard remain exemplified by the Liberal Democrats. And when by saying hard, it's not a smear, it's not an insult. It's just demonstrating that they firmly believe in their respective positions. So all it does is show how divided this country is. It hasn't been a victory tonight for middle ground leave people and middle ground remain people. It's been a victory for the two polar opposites. So it doesn't really clarify anything in that sense. So the next prime minister, if they push for a no deal Brexit, and I understand why they would, incidentally, although I'm wary of a no deal Brexit, I understand why they would, because it seems unfathomable for the next prime minister to take an extension beyond October the 31st, yet another extension, and the EU might not even agree to it anyway, um, because it creates more uncertainty for them. So I can totally understand why someone like Boris Johnson would do that, but then there will be Tories who try to stop that, and the press, I think it was the Times, actually said that could make, for example, a Johnson premiership last for days, is they could face a vote of no confidence within days of taking the office. Now, having a prime minister in office for a few days is the last thing we need right now. We need stable leadership. We need leadership with some gravitas. That's something Theresa May lacked. She was unfortunately robotic. We do, I feel, need a leader with some charisma. Johnson certainly has that. I'll comment more about the leadership race coming up to that. But that's my take on all of this. It's just I see nationalism rising across Europe, and the response to that isn't to agree with them. It's not to leave them unchallenged. And I think part of the problem with the Brexit Party is that whilst the media perhaps has been unfair in its treatment of Nigel Farage, there was that notorious interview between Andrew Marr and Farage, and I like Andrew Marr, but I think it was not his finest hour. I think the style of the interview came across as gotcha and confrontational. It just went down badly. Um, where I disagree with the Brexit Party is this notion that they shouldn't be kind of asked difficult questions. So there's kind of, Farage is almost a cult figure. I'm not going to say he's a cult figure, but it's kind of the one man show. And the interesting thing is that both Change UK, which is a new party, and UKIP, which is now an old party, have done badly tonight. think in the case of Change UK, because the Liberal Democrats already exist, and in the case of UKIP, because Farage went to the Brexit Party. I mean, the people who vote for the Brexit Party, I think, are strongly motivated by Nigel Farage. I think he's a very powerful orator. I think he's, whatever else he may be, he is a very skilled political operator. Um, my big criticism of Farage is he's very good at pointing out problems, but if he was in a position where he could become prime minister, I think it would be a very different story. I think Farage is very good at saying this is the problem and this is the issue with the Brexit Party. They're saying, oh, okay, the establishment's ignored us, they haven't delivered Brexit. This is the problem. But what is their solution post Brexit? I mean, are they going to be a protest party to force Brexit, or do they want to be a serious party that could be looking at future government? That's my question about the Brexit Party.